Welcome to this exclusive International Airport Review video interview where I am today joined by Stephen Gillard, the Director for Sustainability at Boeing UK. In this role, Stephen helps Boeing's customers who exist all across the globe to help reach their net zero and sustainability targets. In the past, he has worked for the UK government with NATO and Rolls-Royce, and his roles at these organisations have been senior, involving the management of strategies, business planning and current affairs. The topic of today's video will be about Boeing's use and promotion of sustainable aviation fuel within aviation, some of the challenges it has faced and what it has had to overcome, and what this means for the future of aviation as a whole. Do be sure to stick around until the end of this video to gain some insight into what Boeing are doing with SAF. Hi Stephen, so would you please start by telling our audience who you are and what your role means for Boeing UK?
Yeah, so thanks very much for having me today. So my name is Steve Gillard and I'm the Regional Director for UK, Middle East and International Defence Sustainability at Boeing. What that means on a day-to-day basis is that I have to look at how can we be a more sustainable business ourselves, but also how can we support our customers in helping them to meet their own sustainability objectives, and also how can we work with governments in the regions that I look after to help them to inform their policies to ultimately help our customers achieve their objectives.
Okay. So how does your role tie into the sustainable aviation fuel generation for aircrafts, and are you currently overseeing any projects that you can potentially give us an update on?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at how do we get to net zero aviation by 2050, we really break this down into four key pillars. So the first one of those is fleet renewal. Okay, so the best thing that I could do today, if in terms of sustainability, is actually replace old aircraft with new aircraft. So every generation of aircraft that we bring into service typically is 20 to 25% more fuel efficient than the last. And if I take the single aisle market, we've only really modernised about 15% of that. So there's a long way to go. The second thing we can do then is actually operate those aircraft in the most efficient manner possible. And you know, the people that are watching this who are involved in airports, this will be something that they're very familiar with, about how do we move those aircraft more efficiently around the airfield. So things like single engine taxiing, how are we pushing back and towing those aircraft around the airfield most efficiently, and using electric tugs and all of those kind of things, really important in terms of reducing emissions. When we look at that and air traffic modernisation, it's probably about another 10 to 15% there in terms of emissions reduction. Then we get to the third pillar, which is about renewable energy. And this is where SAF comes in. And SAF is the critical technology that we have available to us to actually reduce the emissions profile of aviation between now and 2050. Why is that? It's because it's a drop-in technology and we don't need to change the aircraft, we don't need to change the infrastructure, we just need to scale it. And then the fourth pillar, which we'll come back to SAF in a minute, the fourth pillar is around advanced technology. So this is again, what could the next generation of aircraft look like? And we're building a demonstrator that will fly in 2028 called the X66, and that will be about a 30% reduction in fuel burn. So, you know, we want to burn less fuel, but then actually we've got to think about the types of fuel we're burning, and this is why SAF is so critical, because across the life cycle of that fuel, SAF can, you know, with today's generations of fuel, be about a 70% to 80% reduction in terms of emissions. So really, really critical. We just need it at scale. What are we doing as Boeing? In the UK, we were the lead partner in the Energy Innovation Centre at the University of Sheffield. This is a really important national facility that we've partnered with Sheffield on. It's looking at actually accelerating the research and testing and actually then certification of new fuels. We're also partnering with Virgin Atlantic and Rolls-Royce, as you may have heard, on the 100% SAF flight, which is going to fly later this year to New York. Really excited about that. Why is that important? We've committed to have all of our aircraft capable of flying on 100% SAF by 2030. This is part of that journey. And so we'll be able to demonstrate, we'll be able to do this over an extended period of time, that it's safe, that we can demonstrate that to the public. It's really important. But already there's been over 450,000 flights that have taken place on SAF. This is a proven technology, but now it's getting this to this 100%.
Is it ever possible for airports to accommodate sustainable aviation fuel and green infrastructure in their locations? And how would you advise airports to make this infrastructure low cost and accessible?
So they're doing it today. I use Heathrow as a fantastic example of an airport that's really leading the way on this. So Heathrow have a SAF incentive scheme. They launched it last year and it was oversubscribed, and it's being used by a number of leading airlines. So we know it can be done. We also have a number of the pipelines now that are actually actively deploying SAF. So this is actually happening. It's there in the real world. The question of cost is really interesting, because this is both a function of supply, so we need to increase supply, and also government policy. So where we're seeing government policy in place, and so I would use what we're seeing in the United States as a really positive example with the Inflation Reduction Act. We're starting to see production scale, and we're starting to see similar measures coming in around the world. So what we need is more supportive policy where we can, then we'll see the production come up and the costs then will come down. And so that's really what we're looking at. But in terms of actually then bringing it into airports, the beauty of it is it's a drop-in fuel, and so it can be implemented without any changes. And actually I was at Frankfurt airport the other day, and there was a huge SAF inside sign on one of the tanks there, and my daughter was really excited, sort of pointing at it going, "Look, Daddy, your work's there." So it's good to see that it's actually happening there in the real world.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Okay, so what are some of the potential drawbacks the industry must mitigate in trying to overcome, in trying to promote the use of sustainable aviation fuel at airports, and how can the aviation industry as a whole overcome this?
So again, cost is the challenge. And this all comes down to scaling up supply. And so this is why we work very closely with governments. We're also working very closely with the finance industry to understand what is it that we need to actually unlock that. I think, in the past, we've also had some challenges around understanding the S of SAF, making sure that people really understand that this is a sustainable product. And so we work very closely with the roundtable on sustainable biomaterials, RSB, so that people understand that the sustainability of the feedstocks is really important, so people have trust that they're flying on a sustainable product. And so that's really important as well. So it's not just about the cost, it's that actually people understand that this is a truly sustainable product that they are flying on, and that we are making a meaningful difference.
So are there any actual potential pollutants of using sustainable aviation fuel?
This is a common question that comes up, and I think it speaks to what I was saying before about the sustainability of SAF. So the first thing that we look at is the feedstock. So what actually are we producing the SAF from? And so by looking at a scheme like that we've talked about through RSB, what we're looking at then are the impacts of actually producing that SAF. And so that's really looking, is this a sustainable product in the first place? That's really important. But then also we need to look at actually the total climate impact of that fuel. And by that I mean the life cycle of the production, and then actually what do we get when we actually burn that fuel. The interesting thing about SAF is actually typically when we burn it, what we're actually finding is it's actually less polluting and less harmful in terms of the non-CO2 impacts, so things like soot and other things, than actually fossil fuel. So we're quite optimistic about that, and we think there's a really good story to tell there. And so this has got broader benefits than just on the carbon emissions side.
I think you had mentioned this before, but government regulation is quite imperative for airports and the aviation industry as a whole to use sustainable aviation fuel. But would you mind telling our audience just why it's so important?
So people often talk about the green premium, and I think this is something that at the moment with an early technology, whilst it's technically mature, we're still at the point where we're trying to scale production, and so there is a cost difference between fossil and between SAF. At the moment it's between 2 and 4 times the price, and that's really challenging for airlines to actually be able to bear that cost. And so what we're looking for are ways that we can work collectively with governments to help to bridge that cost, particularly until the point that the market matures, and then those costs start to come down.
Yeah.
And so we're starting to see really successful schemes in the US to do that, and it's really helping to accelerate the uptake of SAF. And as you accelerate the uptake, of course, the production increases and the costs come down, and then you don't need those schemes in the long run. So it's just a little bit of help to get us going, that then means that we won't need that help in the long term.
Do you think that's sort of the reason why the uptake for SAF hasn't really been that high?
I think at the moment it's the lack of production capacity at the moment. That's the key challenge, And so it's how do we build that production capacity? And so, but some of this is has been relatively early technology that's only maturing now. And so we're at the beginning of what is going to be a really exciting new industry. And what I find really exciting about it is that we can help to decarbonize aviation, and aviation is a source of huge economic benefit generally. But we can decarbonize aviation, we can create new jobs, and we can provide energy security. So you get 3 for 1. And I can't see many other opportunities that we get to create that kind of benefit anywhere else. So I'm really excited when I go and talk to government. That's the message that we take, and people are really receptive to that.
What are you seeing in terms of users / stakeholders' attitudes towards SAF? Is there more of a change in demand than there has been in the past?
Pretty much everywhere we go now, it's what airlines want to talk about. It's what airports want to talk about. But also, interestingly, it's also what our defence customers want to talk about as well. So, you know, that you noticed that the Royal Air Force last year flew an aircraft on 100% SAF.
Wow.
So this is not something that's now just confined to the commercial world as well. So this is a conversation that's taking place in the UK, it's taking place in Europe, it's taking place in North America, it's taking place in Asia. This is taking place everywhere. And that's what gives me, you know, great hope that we're really on the verge of seeing, you know, the demand is there. Now we've got the long-term commitments are there. Now we just need the supply to scale up. So things are happening.
Is it possible for the whole of the aviation industry to be green and wholly SAF based?
So is it possible for us to be wholly SAF based? So if you look at the EU's mandate, that's got some fairly ambitious figures in there in terms of where they want to get to. The challenge we've got is around deployment of capital, of private sector capital. And when I speak to banks, and I speak to a lot of the large banks in the city and in Canary Wharf, they talk about a willingness to deploy capital. They need confidence from government policy to deploy that capital. So the demand is there from the airlines. We need sort of that little nudge from government, and then it's a question of how quickly. The scale that we would need to build plants is huge. But what I would say is that we're not going to rely on SAF alone. Okay, so our message is always it's SAF and so we talk about, you know, all of these pillars of the strategy coming together. So, you know, fleet renewal, the operational efficiency, renewable energy, and, you know, some of the other forms of renewable energy as well, potentially sort of some hydrogen and some battery electric, as well as these new advanced aircraft type. And then finally, there is going to be a role for CORSIA-based offsets as well to remove residual emissions. So it's going to be a multi-pronged strategy, SAF and to get us to net zero by 2050. What am I willing to sacrifice for the future of green aviation? So for me, this is about ensuring that my kids have got the same opportunities that I have to travel, to go meet people, and to go and have connections. So I've been really lucky. I've gone to go and live all over the world. I've traveled all over the world, and I've, you know, and I think that aviation is a fantastic connector. But in terms of, you know, what am I willing to sacrifice? For me, this is I see this as a true mission to go actually make green aviation happen. I don't see this as a sacrifice. I see this as actually, you know, a really empowering sort of opportunity. So for me, it's not about sacrifice, it's about actually going out there and making it happen. Am I kind of impatient about wanting to make it happen, and am I motivated by that? Yes, because actually, you know, the science and, you know, the climate science says we have to go do this and we have to go and make it happen fast. But what I'm really excited about is I actually work for an organization that actually has this as one of its core values. And I work with customers that are really motivated to go make this happen. So for me, it's not about necessarily sacrifice. I wouldn't use that term. It's about actually having constantly moving at pace, because I'm really conscious that I want my kids to have the opportunities that I've had.
So thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed watching the video, please sure to like this video, leave a comment and subscribe to our channel. For more information about what was discussed today, please visit our website, International Airport Review, or visit Boeing online. Thank you.